This is Where in the World is Reverend Rod, and it got started with this, well, I call it a stick, but it's actually a staff. This name, the Rod of God, has been with me since my first ministry at Forest Hills Baptist in Raleigh. We sang a song about Moses, and there was a phrase called the Rod of God in there. Well, I mentioned that to a good friend of mine, and he actually made the Rod of God here, and that's what this is. This is made by a guy named Robert E. Whitaker, and I want you to meet Bob Whitaker right over here. He's yeah, two different people, but actually this is the same guy. He is so talented. We've been out here looking at his property out here. But I want him to talk a little bit about gardening today, because as you can see behind me, there's a tremendous garden back over here. Bunny is sitting right over there, so just don't think that she's not here. She's sitting right over there, and she tells me that she does all the work. So, Bob, tell us a little bit about this garden. How long have you been doing this?
I've been gardening down here for about 28 years. Well, 27 years. We moved down here 28 years ago. And I started gardening first year. So I've been gardening down here that long. But my gardening hobby goes back to many years ago when we were kids, and we had a family garden at my grandfather's house. And during the summer and after school in the spring and fall, mainly my brother and I, after school, would be loaded into the family car and driven out to the garden where we were forced to work.
Child labor.
Forced child labor.
Yeah.
But
so your grandfather and grandmother really got started.
They did. Now they ran a store, so they were usually tending the store, or grandma was in the house doing something while me and my dad and my brother would actually be out doing the planting and the hoeing and the gathering and whatnot. But, when we were kids, we didn't really enjoy it that much. We'd have rather been doing other things sometimes. And then I really didn't start to appreciate the things that I had learned, mainly from my dad, until later on, especially after I got married, started wanting a garden. Well, my dad would let me have a little space in his garden, but his garden was 3 miles from the house, and we lived right down the street from Mom and Dad, so it was 3 miles from our house too. Not real convenient, when you want to go out and do some gardening. So that worked out fairly well, but it just wasn't very satisfying. In the first house that we had no place for a garden, but I did have a neighbor that allowed me to use a little place in her on her property for a while, but that still wasn't very satisfying. So when we started looking for a house 30 years ago, one of the prerequisites was that it had to have enough land and a space for a garden. And then is when, I started appreciating the things that I learned as a young child, and I wish now that I could just go back in time and spend some time with my daddy out there on a hot summer afternoon chopping weeds. Chopping weeds or planting or whatever. I just to be able to go back and spend time with him doing anything would be great. But even working in the garden, whatever.
I wonder what he would say if he saw this.
Well, I would hope to, of course, it's hard to say, because I think Dad would be pleased. My dad was much of a garden fan. As a matter of fact, when my dad died, he was working in his garden.
I see.
And so that's my plan. See, when I go, this is what I want to do. I want to go when I'm in my garden. It's just something I really enjoy doing, and I get a lot of pleasure not only out of growing things. When they grow, it's a lot of work. There's a lot of frustration. You're totally dependent upon the weather. You just never know if you're going to have a crop or not.
Yeah.
But it's satisfying when you do, and my biggest satisfaction is being able to share when we have a decent harvest to share with others.
Okay. Well, I want to come back to that, but let me stay just a little bit and hover over this. A lot of work. Now, you can do everything you can think of. You can plant the seeds, buy the best seeds, fertilize it, hoe it, have these great rows out here, but you can only do so much, and then you have to rely on things that you got no control over.
Well, yeah, you got to have enough rain, but you don't want too much. You've got to, you have to worry about diseases and insects, and I mean, it's all you can do is plant the seeds and go for the ride, hope for the best.
Now we're going to come back to that. All you can do is plant the seeds, because I have a sermon illustration that might go with that too. Now I see over here you've got, is this grapes over here? Or what is this?
This is an unusual vegetable. It's actually a gourd.
Oh, it's gourd.
It's from this particular one is grown in Thailand. When we were kids growing up, we always called this Chinese okra.
Okay.
But it's a gourd, and if you let the fruit go to maturity, and there's some in there that are that long and that big around, inside it is a sponge. It's called a loofah.
Oh, so that's where loofahs come from.
That's where loofahs come from. This is called a Thai angled loofah. But you can slice this up and fry it like squash or okra. You can put it in soup or stew, or you can stir fry it.
And then you can use it for your bath after that.
You can use, well, after you've eaten it, you can't.
That'd be bad.
Yeah.
Hard to do, wouldn't it?
But yeah, if you let the fruit, if you let the fruit grow and mature,
I see a big one right down there, yeah. Oh my goodness, look at that.
and inside that is a sponge, a loofah sponge. I remember my dad growing these years ago, and I don't know, probably 15 or 20 years ago, I started trying to, I really didn't know what it was actually called, because we always called it Chinese okra. But I finally, after looking through seed catalogs, found a picture of what it was and found out what the name was. So I ordered some seeds, and I've been growing it ever since.
Okay. I'll tell you, and you've got plants of all different kinds. We're going to stand right here, and I'm going to point. Now, what was growing right in there?
Well, that's where I planted my fall greens, and some of them didn't come up too well. But this has got, there's kale, turnip greens, mustard greens.
See over there?
Yeah, and then under the
you got a tin over there.
under the hoops, there's some collards, some cabbage, and some broccoli plants. And then beyond that, to the left of that, is some beans, some green beans.
I see. I tell you, that's a lot of things, and I'm glad to use this stick that my friend made me so I can point as well as walk. This is really nice. Now, I noticed that around your garden here, there are, looks like weather vanes or some things that are blowing the wind around.
Yeah,
What do you use this for?
I'm a weather geek, and this is one of the few places with all the trees that we have around here where I can put the sensors for my weather station, so I can keep track. I just like to keep track of weather conditions, and the one closest to the house is an older one, and this is one I had some Cabela's points I needed to use.
Oh, okay.
So I got this one for free. It's a nicer weather station.
Cabela's, yeah. That's yes, that's the name of the Bass Pro Shop.
Yeah.
They took over that, didn't they? Yeah.
But I like to keep track of the weather, and I can go in and tell You know, some people say all you got to do is look out the window and you can tell whether it's raining or the wind's blowing or not. All you
Yeah.
have to look out the window.
Stick your finger out there. If it's
Yeah.
wet, it's raining.
Yeah.
If it blows your hand off, it's windy.
Yeah.
Exactly, exactly. Now, I noticed as we look over your whole yard here, we not only see the garden inside here, but you've done a lot of work outside. There's a lot of trees and some trees that you've cut down, a lot of plants, just an amazing, you spend a lot of time out here.
That's the main reason we moved out here, because that's what we wanted to do.
This is kind of who you are, isn't it?
I think sometimes I was born in the wrong century.
I wondered about that. Yeah, I can tell, I can tell. You know, I was preparing for today, and you were talking a little bit about how this can be a ministry, and you mentioned, and I met the young woman at the door that you had given some vegetables to. Tell us a little bit about how this, what you do here, can become a ministry.
Well, now the lady that you met that was leaving when you came was one of my mom and dad's neighbors. And for many years, you know, my dad would share garden produce with her. And then after Dad died, I just sort of, you know, picked up the tradition. And we've become really good friends over the years. Of course, she's not able to garden. We have some other friends that are elderly, not able to garden. So we share, you know, with some friends and neighbors that are not able to garden. We share with family. We just got some neighbors that I don't know whether they like to garden or not, or maybe they're too lazy to garden. I don't know. They don't. But when we have some extra, we don't mind sharing. So
The nice thing is you do something that you enjoy, and then you can share that joy with other people who probably need it and don't have that joy.
Well, and you know, we do it mainly for ourselves, but then we always are happy when we have a surplus and are able to share. You know, we were taught as kids that it's more blessed to give than receive, and I still believe that. I get more joy out of giving than I do. I mean, that's my reward is seeing people happy when I give them some produce or whatever.
So we can get joy, and we can give joy to other persons, and our joy is double sometimes.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
Exactly. Now, I was trying to read a good devotion in this book here about gardening and things like that, and I turned to the book of Genesis, and I turned to the book of Exodus, and I turned all the way through the Bible. From the first chapter to the last chapter in here, they mentioned something about gardening and trees and things like that. So I couldn't really find, well, I didn't know if I could find one scripture. There's so many. The parable of the soils, and this kind of reminds me of that. The Garden of Eden and your yard, when I drove up, it kind of reminded me of a mountain retreat, a garden.
Well, that's Bunny. She's responsible for all the flowers. She's the non-edible.
Okay, so she's the non-edible and you are the edible garden.
That's right.
So she's over there, and we'll just have to get her one day just by herself to come over here.
She needs to come over here now.
I know it. Yeah, I don't know if you're going to be able to do that or not. I appreciate that, but I did find out, and this is a passage of the scripture. It comes from John chapter 15, and I want to stop in the middle of it and ask you a little bit about the role of this thing. John chapter 15, and the first two verses. I am the true vine. Well, you showed us one of those, and my Father is the vine dresser. He's like you who manages that vine over there. It says, every branch that does not bear fruit, he takes away. But every branch that bears fruit, now this is the hard part, he prunes it that they may bear more fruit. Now tell me a little bit about pruning.
Well, I don't do much pruning anymore. Originally, this garden that we're standing in right now, when we moved down here, this was actually an orchard. I put in a bunch of apple trees and peach trees, and they required pruning. They had to be fertilized. They had to be sprayed. They just required much more care than I had the time to give them. I was working long hours and just did not have the time to devote to keeping everything pruned properly. So about, it's probably been 12 or 15 years ago, I just came in and removed the orchard and planted a garden because trying to keep everything, but I know the importance of pruning. You do have to prune, keep that productive wood and keep the trees open so the sunlight can get in there.
Sounds like it takes a lot of care too.
It was
a
just
lot
more.
of time
It was just
to do
more
that.
than I could give it. And then, of course, now that I have the time to do it, I'm afraid if I planted an orchard now, that I'd never live to see it bear fruit. So.
Isn't it good that God has the time to prune us when we need it and things like that? Well, I tell you, I have enjoyed this, and what a nice day to be out here in the garden.
It is beautiful.
And I really appreciate your gift and how you share it with other people. And I appreciate Miss Bunny, who's sitting right over there watching all this. But I just thank you so much for sharing your garden with us, reminding us a little bit about how God uses gardens. This will be available next Tuesday. We're recording this a little early because I'll be out of town next Tuesday, but I thank you for sharing.
You're
I
certainly
appreciate
welcome.
that. Now, next week, this is the last video in September, and I just want to ask a question. You know, where in the world is Reverend Rod, and where in the world are you? Wherever it is, this segment told you about that wherever you are, God is there. He'll let you grow, He'll prune you, but when He prunes you, it's only to make you have more fruit. So that's what the lesson was about. I appreciate this. I appreciate how God tends this garden and tends this garden right here. Next week we'll see you. This is Rod. Where in the world is Reverend Rod?